Actually, we're discussing the name of the boat, and finally Srila Prabhupada accepted that name should be Nitai Padakamalam. And he installed the Gaur Nitai deities there. The Abhishek was performed by Jagadish Prabhu. And I remember the day before they were leaving in Prabhupada's room, Bhavananda was going to go out and Sudama was going to be the cook. And Srila Prabhupada said, by doing this program, he said, you will get so much mercy from Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So much mercy. He said, in this program, it should not stop. Then he actually went on the boat. He didn't sail it, but he went on the boat at the ghat. He was walking on the boat and they sung Nitai Pada Kamalam with Prabhupada.
Prabhupada, of course, was lecturing a lot during that week. Prabhupada was reading from the Chaitanya Charitamrita. And, of course, I was sitting there, as always, listening, trying to imbibe everything and hearing all that Prabhupada was saying. By this point, a lot of devotees were not attending because they were sick. They were out on their backs. But I was fortunate enough to be well. But something happened to me that evening of Gaur Purnima. I had this strange feeling of hankering to read Prabhupada's books in a way that I never had before. I even felt like going right back to the States and reading Prabhupada's books, just absorbing myself, just doing nothing but reading Prabhupada's books, even though the Vrindavan part of the festival had not yet occurred yet. And of course, who would want to miss that? But I suddenly realized my relationship with Prabhupada was through his books. And I felt that I was going to have a special relationship with the books, although I had no idea that I would end up being part of the Bhaktivedanta Institute and then going on to Harvard and conducting studies. But it all began there that evening in Mayapur.
In Mayapur, Srila Prabhupada was always really concerned that the women had nice prasadam. He talked to me a couple of times about making sure there was milk every night and that I could go heat it. He made an arrangement so that there would be a fire set aside so that we could heat milk for the ladies who were nursing or pregnant. He wanted to make sure that we didn't get sick and that we had good prasadam, especially milk. But it was real nice. We were staying right there, all the women in Pishima. Pishima would never go into Srila Prabhupada's quarters without another lady. So she would just grab you. Well, before she'd grab you, she'd wash you off with Jamuna water. Then she'd grab you. And she'd ask you to come in with her. And so some ladies who didn't often get to be with Srila Prabhupada got to go in his room because they would go with her. Pishima couldn't really understand what was being said because he was always speaking in English, but she would just like to sit and listen and see Srila Prabhupada.
I was running up to the brahmachari room one evening, and it was getting dark, and I noticed there was a lot of people at Prabhupada's end. Bhavananda and Rasaprayan and Jayapataka, Pradumna, they were all congregated past his room near the end. So I heard very quickly that there had been a snake sighted in Prabhupada's bathroom. So they were looking for the snake, and they were looking, it might be two snakes. So while all this furor was going on, Prabhupada was leaning very relaxedly, nonchalantly. They were all with flashlights looking here and there in the different pipes outside of Prabhupada's or outside the bathroom. Prabhupada was leaning very nonchalantly. He said, "So many men for one snake?" This deep, grave voice with a humorous inflection to it. Only Prabhupada could get away with saying something that would sound very grave, very humorous, and super intelligent, and totally time and place. You'd have everything all built in. It's one statement. He just said, "So many men for one snake?" So, and Pradumna was very worried about where he would sleep, on a shelf. He was still worried the snake hadn't been found. So, in the morning, I'd forgotten about the snake incident, and I was waiting outside Prabhupada's room, and the door opens up, and a couple of people with Prabhupada. He has his cane, and the first thing he says is, "Anyone was bit by this snake?" Also with that kind of humor and biting kind of wit. Then he walked to the steps, and he stopped again, and he said, "Pradumna has fled?" Because he knew Pradumna was particularly worried about the snake. And the whole idea was funny. Pradyumna has fled. And in the class, it was one of Kunti's prayers. Maybe it was Manye Tvam Kalam, that Krishna's time. Prabhupada gave the example. He said, so we think we're very safe in our four-story marble building, but the snake is there, and the snake is death. It's an example of how Prabhupada would utilize everything for his preaching. The snake is death. We think we're very safe.
He was in his room, and all the leading devotees were there. It was really silent. It got pretty heavy then. The Prabhupada was just looking around at everyone, and he wasn't saying anything. And he said, so, there are no questions? And nobody answered. It got even more heavy. The Prabhupada said, why there are no questions? It got even more intense. It is the disciple's duty to question the spiritual master. Why there are no questions? Then somebody said, Srila Prabhupada, in Srimad Bhagavatam, such a person said, is this right? He said, fool! It says in the Bhagavatam and you ask me if it's right. What kind of question is this? Then it got even more intense. And then Hridayananda Maharaj asked the pertinent question. And I broke the ice.
He was walking down an aisleway back to the Vyasa-san to give Bhagavatam class. Everyone was down, prostrated, offering our obeisances. And I remember when Prabhupada walked by, I reached to touch his feet as everyone else was doing. And I touched his feet, and they felt amazing. It was like touching some type of spiritual velvet. It was the most amazing feeling. And then all of a sudden, a dark cloud came over me, where I realized, oh my God, I'm holding on to Prabhupada's feet, and he can't go. And I was petrified at what I had just done. And then I lifted up my head from down the floor, and I looked up at Prabhupada, and he was just smiling at me. And it was like the sun had risen after a dark monsoon rain. And it was just brilliant, and it seemed like everything was bright and happy. And I released my hands from Prabhupada's feet, and he smiled and just continued walking back to the Vyasa side.